All right. Are we live?
We're live.
Well, not
We're
live.
recording.
We're recording. Okay. Well, normally I give this like intro to the Muddy Waters podcast, but it's weird since I'm kind of like in your space, in your studio.
That's okay. We can be jointly hosting, right?
That's exactly right. You're the co-host today of the Muddy Waters podcast. So thank everybody for watching. Obviously we're here because the mainstream media is not doing their job. Because they're propaganda arm of the left. And as we saw very obviously in the recent press conference with Shenna Bellows, where she referred to Steve Robinson and the Main Wire as a quote unquote conservative blogger and refused to take questions from him. So that's why
Which
we
is
exist.
incredible because there's nothing that credentials press in Maine.
Yep.
So it's clear bias, which is not surprising. We all know that Shenna Bellows is a Democrat operative. She was a Democrat senator before she was the Secretary of State. So none of this is surprising.
No, not at all. Yeah, no. It's unfortunate. Like, and part of the reason I say I wish I wasn't here. I wish I wasn't doing this podcast. I'd rather, I would be happy, continuing to work in finance, what I did before. I enjoy it. Part of me is like, I really want to give people more advice on finances. So if anybody's out there and they're like, I need some advice, feel free to reach out and I'll free consultation and go from there. But I really like that stuff. But we're in a space where we don't have we have a media that's lying to us. And one of the best ways to combat that is more information. Obviously, the Main Wire is doing an excellent job.
But let's operate from that assumption that people are not getting information about what's going on right now. And let's start from scratch, right? So we have a ballot initiative, voter ID for me, yes on one, that we want to talk about. And also these shenanigans that have been going on with Shenna Bellows, our Secretary of State. So let's talk about both of those things as though our listeners perhaps are coming in uninitiated from mainstream press.
Yeah.
So I guess first off the bat would be voter ID for me, yes on one. A little summary of that.
Yeah. I mean, the short version is over 80% of Americans, and I believe the numbers are very similar here in the state of Maine, believe that voter ID is common sense. We're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't require it everywhere for voting.
Isn't that wild how if you talk to Europeans, they're like, what do you mean you don't have voter ID? How do you not have voter ID? That's so basic. But here in America, you have really the extreme left are the only ones who don't support voter ID and have all kinds of reasons on why it's unacceptable. Yet when you look around the world, it is pretty much universally acceptable.
Yeah. Well, in the last election cycle, there were some people from the UN who were here observing our elections, and I had an opportunity to meet with them in Portland, and we talked about this, and they're like, yeah, it's weird. It doesn't make any sense. It literally doesn't make sense to most of the rest of the world, but the left has decided that it's racist. They don't talk about that so much here in Maine because we have such a small, minority population, but now it's about disenfranchising old people and making it, and they're claiming that they're trying to save absentee voting, which is still allowable. It's still, fairly easy, really easy for anybody.
Very easzy but secure.
Right.
Right?
Very
and
easy but secure for people to acquire absentee ballots and be able to vote. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's what they're saying. And again, this is just about ensuring that we collect ID and ensure that everybody who's voting is verified that they are actually who they say they are.
Right. So let's back up for a second. Of course, voter ID for me is the citizens initiative where Maine people, hundreds of people, collected signatures, got 170,000 signatures to put voter ID on the ballot. And so now, November 4th, this pending election, of course, early voting has already started, but November 4th is election day. And Maine people will have the opportunity to vote yes on one to secure our elections and pass voter ID. And so for anyone that doesn't know that we are having this election, we have this election coming up, it is. And on November 4th, folks can vote to secure our elections and pass voter ID. Now, this has been a grassroots citizen initiative from the start, and really that's how it needs to get across the finish line, is Maine people doing the work and turning out the vote to get voter ID across the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the number one thing is we need people to go out and vote. And I think it's hard. I think that's the challenge, right? So that's where we need people to help, right? Ask your friends, your neighbors. Right now, you can go out and early vote. We as Republicans, generally speaking, historically are against early voting. We'd rather vote on election day. I get it. But if we can get people to vote, we need to do it. And so last year, I had an opportunity to get my neighbor to show up to vote. She hasn't voted in many elections, and she had some time and I had some time. So I went with her and I voted early, even though I like to vote on voting day. We need to take advantage of those types of opportunities, and we need to help other people get out to vote, because especially in this, really what's going to drive this. The main people are in favor of voter ID, but what's going to drive whether or not this is successful is whether or not enough people actually get out and vote. And so that's the call, is say, hey, can you guys help us? We really think this is important. We need people to work hard and get themselves out and get their friends out and, ask their friends and neighbors and get people out. And if we do that, I think we win this, right? And I think
Absolutely.
We can do this.
For sure. And it
Shenna
really
Bellows
is a
has
turnout
helped
game.
us a little bit.
Yeah,
She
Shenna
might
Bellows
have.
has perhaps helped us a little bit. It's a numbers game, right?
Yep.
This is an off-year election, so we're going to see theoretically lower turnout than a gubernatorial year or presidential year. And so it is all about turning your friends and family out to vote. And to the folks who say, I only vote on election day, I understand, but you know what? 40% of Mainers vote absentee or early, and that number is only probably going to grow.
Yep.
And I think about the scenarios where, I was talking to a gentleman who, told me, well, I only vote on election day. And then he admitted that had just the year prior made him miss voting because, a work trip came up suddenly. It was after absentee voting had ended, right? That ends on the Thursday before Election Day. Friday, this trip comes up. He couldn't avoid it. So he was then gone the following Tuesday, Election Day, and he missed voting in a tremendously important election. And so then realized, these things come up. Kids get sick. Somebody breaks a leg. Work trips happen.
Yeah.
Bank that vote early, and then that you have voted, you've made sure that you've done your civic duty, and in this case, that you've voted on a really important initiative, voter ID, where the left is working, wholesale. Of course, some Democrats do support voter ID, many do, but the extreme left is pulling out all the stops to try to ensure that voter ID doesn't pass. They don't want it law here in Maine. And so they're doing everything they can. So we do encourage folks to vote early. Yeah. Early voting started on Monday, and it's time for folks to take advantage of that and bank their vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get out there. Let's do this. Let's win this. And, it's one of the steps in the direction of securing our elections. The reality is, it doesn't fix all the potential problems I think that we have in our elections, but it's a huge step in the right direction, and we need to make it happen. And it's just good. It's just good legislating, even though it's not legislating, right? It's through the voter initiative or the ballot initiative process, but it's good law is what we're focused on. And despite the nefarious way in which it was worded by our lovely Secretary of State.
Well, let's talk about some of that for a minute, right? This is the longest ballot question in Maine history. Shenna Bellows is setting all kinds of records here. She started the shenanigans regarding voter ID really early on. And so this is the longest question in Maine history. It's, I believe, 66 words long. Wow. And it kind of hides the main point in the end. It doesn't actually say voter ID. It says, certain photo ID. And trying to obfuscate what this is really about. Right. But one of the things that this initiative does that the other side is really trying to, they're lying about it, right? They're talking about the effects on absentee voting. So let's set the record straight, right? Yep. The question does talk about the changes to absentee voting. And any changes to absentee voting are the changes that will ensure that, yes, folks have to show ID for both in-person and absentee voting, because we want to make sure our elections are as secure as possible. So let's chat about that piece of it for a few minutes.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably the expert in this category, but my understanding, again, is when it comes to absentee ballots, people can still request an absentee ballot. They can still request it online, but as part of the process, they would have to, I'm assuming there would be a portal that would be available where they would have to upload and have their ID verified, like I had to do when I closed on a loan recently. I had to upload. There's not
even an upload. You just have to include the information about your ID. So
you don't even have to put in.
You don't even have to.
Photo. You just have to put your ID number, expiration date,
just
that kind of
put
stuff.
the last numbers of your ID on your request form. Whether that's your online request, you can still request via the mail. Yep. You can get it in person. So there's all kinds of ways that you can now. It does
And family members
change.
can still request it on your behalf,
Third
right?
party can still happen.
As
but
long
what
as there's ID information presented.
Absolutely. The piece that's changed is that you can no longer just call up the town office and say, hey, I'm Joe Schmo. I'm requesting my ballot. But what you can do is say, hey, I'm Joe Schmo, and I'd like you to send me an absentee request form. And so it's really very simple. Folks can still, by that modality, request by phone because they can get their request form, fill it out, and return it for their absentee ballot. They never have to set foot in the town hall. So it's still very, very accessible online, in person, via snail mail. There are multiple ways to get an absentee ballot. So absentee voting is not going anywhere. We've got 40% of the voting population who use that method, and they'll still be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that their whole agenda is like suggesting that this is ending or eliminating or making it, absentee voting. And it's not. It's just ensuring that we have collected information about somebody's photo, of somebody's ID, verifying their identity. And I think that is completely obviously reasonable. That makes sense. We need, I personally would say that we need to maybe a step further and use that tool that I was mentioning that I had to do for my loan to verify that it's also a valid ID. And anyway, like all those types of things. But the point is, like, it's actually quite easy, as you said,
it is very
to
easy.
be able to acquire an absentee ballot, and there's really no good reason to oppose this.
Well, there's all kinds of nefarious reasons, right? But you're right. There is no good reason to oppose this. Question 1, yes on 1, ensures that folks have to show an ID in person or absentee. That's the bottom line. And, Augusta Democrats have vigorously opposed voter ID for years. The legislature has refused to pass it. And that's why the Citizens Initiative was necessary in the first place. And so now, of course, they're fighting tooth and nail to avoid it being passed into law. That's not surprising. It is incredible to see so many shenanigans happening, so many lies being spread about what the initiative does. But last week we had some events come up that
Well, can we,
next level.
I also want to talk about something else real quick because I think it's one of the other myths that's been put out there, about absentee voting. Not absentee voting, actually. This is more about, like, what if you show up to vote and you don't bring your ID with you, right?
Yes.
Because there's this myth here that you'll be turned away and you won't be able to vote. Is that true?
No. Of course, that's not true.
Right. Okay.
So if someone does not have their ID, right, there's a learning curve to this. Someone could show up to the polls and not have their ID on them. And so if they do, then they'll be able to cast a provisional ballot, and then they'll have 4 days to prove their ID. So everyone can vote.
4 business days?
To prove their
So basically the next Monday.
Yeah, so they'll
Almost an entire week.
They'll be able to prove their ID, just bring their photo ID back, and then their ballot will be counted.
Yeah, I think that's just a really important one because that's one of the ones that they're throwing out there that's absolutely ridiculous because it's dishonest. And again, here in Maine, they're not talking so much about like how difficult it is to obtain an ID, but that's another one of the ones that I wanted to touch on real quick because
it's the usual objection, right?
Right. It's expensive and it's hard for poor people to be able to get IDs. So you're disenfranchising poor people, right?
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
In this day and age, you need an ID to do just about everything.
Yep.
But of
to
course,
get a Costco card, just for the record,
to get a PO box, to do anything.
Yeah.
But we don't want that to be a barrier. Yep. And so, of course, this legislation ensures that if someone can't afford an ID will be provided for them. And I think, even as a fiscal conservative, I think that is a good use of tax dollars to ensure that this doesn't disenfranchise voters and that every single person that is eligible to vote can do so. And if that requires providing an ID to anyone that can't afford one, that is worth doing. That is usually the biggest far left objection, that folks can't afford IDs. And so we took care of that one. Now they're having to come up with other ones like it gets rid of absentee voting or, folks can't.
What else can we
XYZ,
make up?
I don't know. And so they're having to make stuff up now that they don't have the cost of the ID as the primary objection.
Yep. Yeah. It's very unfortunate that we can't just be honest and truthful and like, again, there are so many issues right now that the Democrats are on the wrong side of that are 80-20 issues that the majority of Americans and Mainers are not with what the Democrats are pushing. I feel bad for Democrats actually because the people representing them are not actually representing them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I mean, this issue illustrates that pretty clearly, right? Because there are Polling shows that there are folks across party lines. Over 50% of Democrats support voter ID.
Yeah.
And so their own party is disenfranchising them by lying to them and telling them that this initiative, Yes on One, is something other than what it is, when it simply will ensure secure elections through requiring voter ID for in-person and absentee voting.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Even to the point where what's interesting about it is like it doesn't go so far as they're trying to pretend that it does, to the point where there are people on the right that are saying it doesn't go far enough, right? And so that's the reality is like we're not this is reasonable, responsible governance is what this is. So, but I do want to go to the we're going to use the word bad actors for since it's Shenna Bellows' turn, we're going to say I should say that she's been using she was the first bad actor in this in inappropriately wording the ballot initiative, weaponizing the ballot question. Yeah, absolutely. But obviously she did a beautiful press conference recently that I think was lauded by everybody.
If anybody's listening to this, not watching, I hope they can hear the sarcasm in the quotes there. Explaining the events of last week, or not explaining would be the correct term for what she did at that press conference. So backing up again, of course, if anybody's following mainstream media, they'll have no idea that there were 250 ballots, official main ballots that showed up in an Amazon package last Wednesday in Newburgh. And so walk us through that scenario of what happened there, and then we'll talk about the press conference and all that.
Yeah. So my understanding, again, from the reporting that Steve Robinson did and a number of other things that I found, is that this woman received an Amazon package that appeared obviously to have been tampered with, in the mail. And my understanding is she kind of panicked and she's like, I don't really know what to do. The rumors are that she's a registered Republican. Don't know all the details on that. And so she didn't know what to do. And so she reached out to her town. She also reached out to a conservative blogger, I'm told, also known as Maine's best news source, which is the Maine Wire, and Steve Robinson. And she gave that information to Steve. They, took pictures and brought it to her local town.
So to be clear, this woman receives a package, an Amazon box. Yep. She ordered, I love the collection of items, right?
Very interesting.
I think like a lightsaber for her kid. Paper goods, rice. So typical, right? All of us ordering off of Amazon have like these collections of things. And this is certainly an interesting one with the lightsaber, the rice, and the paper goods. But then in addition, 250 main ballots. That's the surprising piece. They're in there individually, 50 at a time, shrink wrapped. And you could see this in the pictures that are online in the news. And so then, yes, she took it to the town office. Now, my understanding, it sounds like the town office called the Secretary of State the next day. So yes, this news broke perhaps before the Secretary of State knew about it. Which she was obviously very irritated about at the press conference when she was referring to the bloggers. But
there's actually a good reason that it didn't get reported to her on the day that it happened, because this happened late in the day, and by the time the town clerk got it, it was after business hours had closed at the Secretary of State. So had they called, they wouldn't have gotten anybody. And so it was the next morning, the next available opportunity to be able to reach out, the information was presented to her.
Exactly. And so these ballots got turned in. And now, of course, law enforcement is all over this, right?
I think it was initially her team that confiscated everything, right? Not the Maine State Troopers.
There was a rumor that it was Maine State Troopers, but then we find out that, lo and behold, the Secretary of State is investigating the Secretary of State, and that BMV law enforcement collected the ballots. And so there's no transparency, no accountability, unknown any details on the investigation, because the Secretary of State, while she did have a press conference this week to outline absentee voting process and to say that there were 250 ballots missing from one town, Ellsworth. And then, of course, we can all do the math, right? If there's 250 ballots missing in one town and there's 250 ballots that show up 40 miles away in Newburgh,
That's probably where they were intended
I mean,
to
that's
go.
probably where they were intended to go.
You know?
When asked that question, Secretary of State was quick to say, well, I can't comment on ongoing investigation, but we can all do math.
Yeah.
And so here we are, over a week later, and we have no comment on the ongoing investigation, which is the Secretary of State investigating herself. And, do
you think she's going to find herself
a bad actor?
Guilty? Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. The bottom line, though, is that regardless of what happened, right, regardless of who is at fault, how these ballots went missing and then ended up in Newburgh, it just underscores the bottom line. And that is, we need greater transparency and accountability in our elections. Yep. We need to secure our elections by every means possible. Yep. And that means passing voter ID. And that means voting yes on one this November to ensure that we are taking every possible step that we can so that Maine people know that when they cast their ballot, their vote is secure.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the thing here is, like, even if you're in the camp that says that our elections are completely secure in Maine, there's nothing to worry about, right? If you fall into that camp, then what's the harm, right?
Exactly.
There is a significant portion of people here that do not trust the elections. If we've got a situation of distrust, in order to make sure that the most people can trust the election, we should pass voter ID, because it helps people believe more in the system. If we don't believe in the system, then we're going to devolve into chaos, and we don't want that to happen, which is why we need to pass yes on one, voter ID. It just makes sense.
Yeah. And I hear people saying that in the wake of this, the Bellows ballots, right? Yeah. That's what I'm calling, we're calling them Bellows ballots. Yeah, these 250 Bellows ballots that turned up in an Amazon box. I am hearing folks on occasion say, well, I'm just not going to vote because of this or because of X, Y, and Z. No, that is not an acceptable response. The appropriate response is, we need to turn out every single person who cares about election integrity and who wants to see voter ID as law in Maine. We need to make this, to borrow a phrase, turn a phrase.
Careful.
We need to make this election too big to rig.
I agree. Yeah, no,
and
100%.
Get every single voter off the couch. It is typically a low turnout election, so let's make this a huge turnout election and get folks to the polls to vote yes on one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% what we need to do. Use this because it's true. Like, regardless of who ends up being behind it, the reality is we here in Maine are concerned about our elections, and we need to make sure that they are safeguarded. We don't know who did this, and I think it's really funny. Neither does Shenna Bellows. She was on Ray Richardson. For anybody who hadn't seen it, follow Steve Robinson.
I hear it was a bad actor.
She kept saying the bad actors and they will be punished. Bad actor and they will be punished. Bad actor and they will be punished. And then Ray said, "Do you have knowledge? Do you have anything to prove that this was actually done by a bad actor and it wasn't accidental? There was not some sort of a mistake in chain of custody or whatever?" And she's like, "No, I don't know any. That's in law enforcement's hands. But this bad actor will be punished." And it's like, okay, it sounds like you're concluding before the investigation is complete.
It's amazing that that's her only conclusion, where my only conclusion is vote yes on one. We need to secure our elections.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I think that Shenna Bellows is demonstrating that every day here, the longer that this goes, and that we don't have answers.
And we have more questions, actually. Yes. The press conference was basically a long conversation about how our election process works and how they send out ballots and, absentee ballots in particular. But none of it, and there's no responsibility, I think, on her part taken for the fact that this is a failure of our elections department to ensure that things are done appropriately, right? Like, the fact that these got out there in the first place is a breakdown. It is a failure. And first and foremost, even if there's somebody else that's responsible, first and foremost, the number one person responsible for this is Shenna Bellows, and she took no responsibility and just blamed other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's pretty typical.
Well, I mean, this is not the first snafu. Mm-hmm. Neither was her wording of the ballot initiatives, and it's not going to be the last, right? She's demonstrating herself to be less than competent.
Yes. We do have the whole license plate debacle. Shenna Bellows has been at the helm of a number of debacles now at this point. And so, it is it is not altogether surprising to me that this has happened under her watch. Because I don't think folks can trust her level of competence.
Yep.
But I will reiterate, I mean, I'm kind of sounding like a broken record at this point, but I would reiterate that all that does is point to the fact that Mainers need to turn out. They need to get to the polls and vote yes on one to ensure that our elections are secure as possible, and that our voice and our vote does count and does matter. And we do that by passing voter ID, voting yes on one.
Yeah, and so to your point, we need your help. We need you to show up and help us out and get this passed, because without the voters, we're not going to make it happen, but we can make it happen. We can secure our elections. Hopefully aside from that, Shenna resigns and withdraws her gubernatorial run, because she's incompetent.
Well, I think, her Democrat opponents have got to be, loving the longer this goes on. Maybe.
It's good for them being able to win the primary, but it's not good for them being able to win the general.
Right.
This is the person who is still the Secretary of State, Janet Mills, as well as all the other Democrat
Governor
candidates.
Mills has gone on the record and said this is not a big deal. She's not concerned about, election security here in Maine. But that's kind of what she has to say, right?
Sure.
Because these folks are opposed to voter ID. They're opposed to yes on one. And so they have to kind of double down on there's nothing to see here. We have no problems with our election security. And so don't make that leap from 250 extra ballots, in a location where they shouldn't be, to let's pass voter ID, when that is exactly the leap folks should make. That's the natural conclusion. And so they have to just deny, and say everything's fine.
Yep.
That's the only thing that fits in their narrative that says that, passing voter ID, that doesn't fit in that extreme agenda. They want to keep the status quo as is.
Well, it's because I don't know if it was the chair of the party, I think the chair of the Democrat Party claimed that if voter ID passes, they'll lose 13,000 votes.
Yeah, I can't figure out the mechanism for that. How do you lose 13,000 votes just because folks have to, verify who they are with an ID? That sounds to me like they're saying
they're cheating. It's almost like it seems like they're admitting to dishonesty.
I don't know what other conclusion you could draw from that. And so, I think that they're making up reasons now to not support voter ID, but then also saying that there perhaps are legitimate reasons we should pass voter ID. That's what I get from the chair of the Democrat Party going on the record there. I like what you said earlier about, taking a friend to the polls to vote. And I think that that's really what this is going to take, that we all have to take accountability and ownership for this election and ensure that our friends and family do get out to vote. And that does include perhaps taking folks to the polls to vote. And so, if each of us gets our circle of friends and family to vote, ensures that they turn out, that could look like, texting, following up to make sure folks verify that they have gotten out to vote, encouraging them to vote early, driving friends and family to the polls. All of the above needs to happen to ensure that we win this election. And I'll emphasize this as well. Voter ID is not the only thing on the ballot. We also have an extreme piece of legislation that's question 2. And that is a question that would completely undermine due process as far as the Second Amendment. It is absolutely, as much as we're yes on one, the no on 2 has to be emphasized.
100%.
There are so many reasons to get to the polls and vote this election. And also there are local elections. And I don't want to leave that out or neglect that. 100%. Here in Auburn, in my town, we have city council, the full city council and school board that are up for election. So in a lot of towns, there's of course the ballot initiatives 1 and 2, vote yes on 1, no on 2. But there's also local elections. And so folks should be aware of that. If you care about the future of our kids' education, there are a lot of school board members being voted in right now. And so whatever it takes to motivate our friends and family to vote, right? Maybe they care about voter ID, maybe they don't. Maybe they care about gun rights, maybe they don't. Maybe they care about education more. Whatever that motivator may be, let's use it to turn out our friends and family and ensure they get to the polls to vote.
100%. So you heard it here first. No, you didn't hear it here first. But let's get out. Let's do this. Let's take our state back because we're being run by incompetent people who don't care about truth. They don't care about justice, which is evidenced by the things that we see all over the place. So let's get out and let's change our state. This is one of the ways that we can do it, protecting gun rights and due process, and also ensure safeguarding our elections. So thank you all.
Thanks so much for your time and the conversation. And we'll do a final reminder. Folks, do get out to the polls and vote this November 4th, anytime between now and then. You can vote early, vote absentee, but get out and vote yes on one to secure our elections.
100%. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Laura, for taking the time to come on the podcast.
My pleasure.
I always appreciate it.